Look out, y'all, Ashy Knuckles. I'm gonna do this video. I'm gonna piggyback off of Zone Six's video. In the video, you should go check it out. Zone Six Boxing. He did a video comparison. I think it was the legacies of Evander Holyfield and Larry Holmes. Good video. I encourage you to go check it out. Make sure you thumb it up and subscribe to him. Good shit on that channel. But I just want to chime in. This is in no way a debate video. I don't do debates, because I just don't. I think it's better just to have civil discussion and just everybody chiming in on it, their own interpretation of whatever events took place and whatever discussion going on. But I wanted to touch bases on that video in particular and kind of just in general boxing when you have two different types of roads to greatness. As we all know, the road to greatness for a guy who has an Olympic pedigree, a lights out amateur career, culminating with the Olympic medal, whether it's gold, silver, or bronze, is different from the guy who doesn't have that. The path to glory is always paved for these guys, whether you say the Roy Joneses, the Oscar De La Hoyas, the Floyd Mayweathers, or guys from back in the game like the Spinks, the Ali's and whatnot. He won the gold medal at light heavyweight and so forth. Joe Frazier, George Foreman. The road, the path to greatness is always different. It's easy to market a guy as the hometown hero when they've been to the Olympics, when they were big time amateur, as opposed to a guy who wasn't, and that was basically a guy like Larry Holmes, a guy like James Toney, and several others who had to take Bernard Hopkins, guys that had to take the hard road to get to glory. Not saying that it's easy. These guys still got to win the fights that they get, but in order to get these fights, to be on that upper echelon level, it's paved out for you, like Evander Holyfield is another example. Lights out amateur, Olympic pedigree and whatnot. The road is just substantially different. In that video, you did bring up one truth, and I wanted to touch on that. You said that Larry Holmes never unified the heavyweight division, and I just wanted to chime in on that because during that time, we know that the recognized champion prior to Larry Holmes and during the time Larry Holmes was a titleist was Muhammad Ali. He was the recognized face. He was recognized as champion. And when Larry Holmes would acquire his WBC title, he beat Ernest Shavers and Ken Norton. He still wasn't the unified champion. He still wasn't recognized as the champion because the champion at that time, Ali, would end up losing his title to Leon Spinks. He would, end up winning that title back and retiring, but that was short-lived. But the time where Larry Holmes had his title and he was defending his title and whooping ass, he was never getting the credit that he wanted as champion. People didn't really recognize him. We all know he was a sparring partner of Muhammad Ali, and it was hard for him to shake that image because the people did not receive him as champion. He would always be up under Muhammad Ali's shadow as a sparring partner, or a guy Muhammad Ali used to beat up and he would win a world title. And, he was basically looked at as a poor man's Ali because Ali revolutionized heavyweight boxing. Prior to Ali, you really didn't see anybody over 200 pounds get on their toes and box behind a jab and move, And we all know Muhammad Ali patterned his game after Sugar Ray Robinson anyway, because before you heard I am the greatest, I'm the king of the world, you heard Sugar Ray and I are two pretty dancers. He patterned his game after Sugar Ray Robinson. And when Muhammad Ali fought in that manner at the heavyweight division, guys patterned their games after Muhammad Ali. And Larry Holmes was no different. He was another guy over 200 pounds. He'd get on those toes. He'd box behind probably one of the best jabs I ever seen in the history of the sport. So while Larry Holmes wanted and desired to be recognized as a great champion, he wasn't getting that. And, he really wasn't liked by the establishment. He was very opinionated, very vocal, and openly fucking racist. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he didn't hold back his tongue for anything. So on his quest to be recognized as a great champion, the guys that were placed in front of him, he was beating them. But it wasn't until, at least he thought, Muhammad Ali would come back, because he didn't retire for long. I think Muhammad Ali had tax troubles. Muhammad Ali would come back and fight Larry Holmes. By then, Muhammad Ali didn't have any tangible belts because it was, gone once he retired. All that stuff is vacant. But he was still universally recognized as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And when Larry Holmes beat the brakes off of Ali, he then took that recognition as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world without having to unify the belts, because by then the WBA belt was held by Mike Weaver, and Larry Holmes already beat the dog shit out of Mike Weaver anyway. So he was recognized, or at least he thought he would have the respect of the people as the champion. Now he was recognized as the champion, but the people kind of turned on him because they thought he kind of did Muhammad Ali bad, because he put them hands on Muhammad Ali. He beat him real bad. He dominated him. Muhammad Ali was an aged fighter. He did not belong in the ring at that time, even though it was a big fight. It was a big money fight. It was the biggest name on Larry Holmes' ledger. And I don't even remember. I don't even know. I wasn't around at that time. I was just a little boy. I didn't know nothing about no analyzing boxing and stuff like that. But I'm not even sure if people even thought that the poor man's Ali could beat the real Ali. But he did. But the recognition that he thought he would get off of the fight, he didn't get. It was actually disappointment, and people really didn't really like him. And of course, he wasn't liked by white America because he was openly verbal. I mean, he spoke his mind. And the guys that white America thought were going to be the next great didn't pan out. And he was openly verbal about that. I mean, we all know about his fight with Cooney. So while while Larry Holmes would, do everything in his power to be known as a great champion, he would continue to dominate the upper echelon of the division. He wasn't getting the respect that he desperately wanted, and he basically developed a little resentment because of it. So as he continued to rack up victories, he was undefeated, and Lord knows they did not want him to break Rocky Marciano's undefeated record. And that brings us to the fight that he had with Michael Spinks. And Michael Spinks was, like I said, he was coming up from the light heavyweight division, undisputed champion, great champion. And he had close battles with Larry Holmes. He had 2 fights with him, and Larry Holmes did not get to see his undefeated record. He didn't get to see it. He didn't break Marciano's record. In other words, I'm giving everybody a concise version because, really we can go on for hours and hours on this. Anyway, after those fights with Michael Spinks, Holmes was basically inactive. He wasn't in the ring. He was gone. And by the time Holmes would come back to the sport to compete, there was a new young hotshot champion in the heavyweight division by the name of Mike Tyson, who was making big noise in the 80s anyway. He was coming up. And Holmes had been out of the ring for over a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And of course, we know what happened when that version of Larry Holmes would get in the ring with Mike Tyson. He would get his ass whooped. And after that fight, Holmes was basically in exile. He was gone for several years out of boxing, which he would end up coming back to boxing and starting to try to make his claim again as a real good fighter. And he had successive wins before he got into a marquee fight in which the fans and the pundits did not think he had a chance in hell of winning. And that was a fight against the then WBO champ, Ray Mercer, who was a damn good fighter. Ray Mercer's claim to fame is that He was undefeated, of course. He was a great fighter, but he had knocked out Francesco Damiani and Tommy Morrison. Y'all know Tommy Morrison from Rocky, and he beat those guys. So going into the fight with Ray Mercer, nobody thought that he was going to beat Ray Mercer. He was an underdog. Um, and of course, that fight itself wasn't sanctioned by the organization, the WBO itself, because he had to fulfill a mandatory. If I'm not mistaken, Ray Mercer had a mandatory to fulfill, which he didn't. He took the money fight and the fight with recognition attached to it because he would have been fighting a legendary, well, an older champion. It would have been another big name under his resume by fighting a surgeon, Larry Holmes. Well, Larry Holmes would not only prove the critics wrong, but he beat the brakes off of Ray Mercer and won and beat him. And that's when he really started getting the recognition that, oh, he is a great champion. He had been a great champion all this time. It was us that had it mistaken. But back to the fact that he didn't unify. Um, he didn't really need to unify, like I said. When he had beaten Muhammad Ali was universally recognized as the champion. He didn't have the WBA title because he had retired, and that the belt ended up being won by Michael Weaver, who Larry Holmes already beaten. So he didn't need to beat him again to be recognized as the champion. He beat everybody who had any claim to being the champion. And when he was awarded the IBF belt, that's because when the IBF was formed in the 80s, in order to gain recognition, they gave all the recognized champions at that time, all the undisputed champions, they awarded them the title. So right out the box, they were giving the title to guys who were already the champion, like Michael Spinks, Marvin Hagler, Larry Holmes, Aaron Pryor. I think they gave it to Donald Curry too, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why he had the IBF title, because IBF gave their inaugural title to all the undisputed champions at that time. So he was recognized as a unified titleist, even though on paper he didn't unify. So I just wanted to chime in on that, as opposed to Evander Holyfield's career, which you elaborated greatly on. His road to greatness was not the same. I mean, he didn't have to crawl and scrape through the barrel, fighting everybody that was placed in front of him, taking fights, the only fights that he can get in order to get to be great is because he had Olympic pedigree. He was pegged for greatness. He would unify the cruiserweight division and be undisputed, and of course go to heavyweight and unify and be undisputed and win the heavyweight title several times, more times than basically everybody else. And he had a great career. He was basically a small heavyweight. He probably really didn't even belong at that weight because he was very undersized. But whatever he lacked in size, he made up with heart and determination, and he had a will to win, and that's what endeared him to the public, which Zone 6 just elaborated a lot on. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying it's kind of hard for me, at least for me, to kind of gauge who had a better career or whatnot, because the road is not the same. You know what I'm saying? The road is not the same. Just like for a guy like James Toney coming in, he didn't have the big lights out amateur career, and in order to get to where he got, he had to fight the guys that were placed in front of him. People didn't see James Toney coming. I mean, let's be honest. Who really thought he was going to beat Michael Nunn when he fought for the world title at middleweight? Michael Nunn, slick ass southpaw boxer, classy boxer. You know what I'm saying? The favorite going into the fight, and he was tough. He was hard to beat. The motherfucker had skills, and I know virtually nobody thought that this kid, James Toney, who was basically founded by a woman, which was unheard of at that time, you know what I'm saying, would come in and unseat the champion in Michael Nunn. You know what I'm saying? They didn't see James Toney coming. He had to fight everybody that was placed in front of him in order to get to where he needed to get in order to get the bigger fights. Same with Bernard Hopkins. Didn't have this big time amateur career. I mean, a lot of these guys fought amateur fights. They just wasn't this big time amateur star. You know what I'm saying? Bernard Hopkins, Came in, lost his, I believe, his professional debut. He lost. He would continue to rack up victories, and he would lose against Roy Jones. And if he ever was going to beat anybody at this game, he knew he had to continue to win after that and take the fight game way more seriously than he ever did and get his hands on a title, because he knew once he got his hands on the title and he can continue to defend that title, he could not be denied for long until he would end up getting the biggest marquee fight. Actually, the middleweight tournament that Don King put together with him, William Jaffe, Keith Holmes, and Felix Trinidad was Bernard Hopkins' big break. This was his chance because it was a highly touted middleweight tournament because Tito was in it, and nobody thought that Bernard Hopkins was going to win. Everybody thought the favorite to win it was Tito. He was a surgeon, star fighter. He was knocking out everything that he got in the ring with. He was facing everybody while they were hot. He didn't wait till somebody else whooped their ass first. You know what I'm saying? As a lot of champions do. It wasn't timing when he was fighting these great fighters. He was fighting them while they were hot. And that's why people recognize Tito as a great champion, not just by his accomplishments, because he was daring to be great, going through all these divisions on a quest to get to Roy Jones. His whole thing was to go through division by division to get to Roy Jones. So when they put the middleweight tournament together, you probably already know this, but just for people who don't, when Don King put the tournament together, it was Bernard Hopkins who was the unheralded guy. If you wasn't just watching fights on the regular, you wouldn't know who Bernard Hopkins was. But the real fight fans knew who Bernard Hopkins was. It still didn't make him the favorite when he fought Tito, but this was Bernard Hopkins' big break. All these years of making sure he had victory after victory till he couldn't be denied, till he can get the big fight. It all happened when he fought in that tournament and won the tournament and beat Tito. And from there, Bernard Hopkins became the Bernard Hopkins that everybody knows. The guy who would fight anybody, any champion, anywhere, anytime, anyhow. The modern age Benny Briscoe. You know what I'm saying? But he surpassed Benny Briscoe in like hundreds of ways. And Bernard Hopkins is who it is. Same thing with James Toney. He would get title after title. I mean, he was pound for pound number one. After a while, he had over 40 some odd fights before he had his first professional defeat. These guys' path were not the same as the guys who had this big Olympic pedigree and big time amateur career. So to me, I find it hard to even compare a lot of these guys. I won't even begin to debate the differences in careers because it's just not the same. Like a guy like Oscar De La Hoya as opposed to a guy like who was like a welterweight at that time who didn't have a big amateur career. I don't know, man, but it's just the road is different from the Olympic athletes as opposed to everybody else. With the Olympic athletes, they see them coming. The guys who don't have the big amateur career and the big Olympic pedigree, the road is different. They got to claw and scrape and climb their way to the top. A guy like Nate Campbell didn't have a big time amateur career. He had amateur fights, but he wasn't no Olympic guy. He had to crawl and scrape, take fights on short notice, fights on weeks notice. He still got to make weight. You know what I'm saying? And if he ain't in the gym training that whole time, he would have been in the fight drained, got his ass whooped, and basically been obscure. And there's a lot of guys that fit under that category. Guys that were killers coming up, but they didn't have the big time backing. They didn't have the high profile promoters. It's just, I don't know, man. I just wanted to chime in on all that and kind of give my take on that video. Like I said before, it's a great video. If I have any inaccuracies in this video, anybody can feel free to chime in. That's my problem. I don't do no research. Everything I go off the top of my head, and it's been a while since I visited this topic, but I remember a lot of key aspects of a guy like Larry Holmes' career. And any way that I'm wrong, chime in, make a video, leave a comment, and we can discuss this thing further. But like I said, if you haven't seen Zone 6's videos, check it out. It was a good video, very accurate, chronological. Anything you want to know about those guys, he was basically outlining it for you in that video. I encourage everybody to check it out. But until next time, I want to holler at y'all's Ash. Deuce.